Welcome to the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast, the podcast that mixes wellness with personal development tips and info specifically for beauty industry professionals. I'm your host, Abby O'Sullivan, a longtime esthetician and lash artist turned wellness coach. With burnout and health issues on the rise amongst my beauty pro friends, I know we need a space to come together, to learn, support each other, and get the push you need to take care of your health. Together, we'll dive into topics like mobility training for a less achy body, managing stress and the chaos of running a business and handling clients, setting up your self-care routines, and so much more. You deserve to feel as good as your clients do when they leave you. Let's make time for you, starting with this podcast. Welcome back to the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast. Today's topic is one that I am so pumped to share with you. Really, I don't share anything that I'm not pumped about. That's like part of my nature. But this one's near and dear to my heart because I'm very passionate about this, and it is podcasting, starting a podcast as a beauty professional. So if you've ever thought about or you want to start a podcast, stay tuned. This episode is for you. I'm going to talk about how you can use a podcast to expand your personal and business brand as a beauty professional, plus give you some tips for getting started and monetization. Because if you're starting a podcast as a business owner, you can be in it to make some money. Yep. So first, let's talk about what keeps business owners from starting a podcast. Let's just dive right in. Starting a podcast sounds like a lot of fun, right? And it is. It is. Like when people tell me they want to start a podcast, I'm like, do it, 100%. But you could also be thinking, do I have the time? How do I get started? What should I talk about? What if my voice sounds weird? I don't like the sound of my own voice. Will people even listen to me? What equipment should I get? What's the best platform to use? Like so many things. Oh my God. I'll just wait until I have everything perfectly ready and the perfect time and blah, 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 blah. These are the common swirling thoughts many people have before starting their podcast. And in fact, the very thoughts that keep them from starting their podcast. And I totally understand. I've been there myself. Love the idea. How the fuck do I execute it? And how the fuck do I stay consistent? It's so easy to get trapped in the perfectionism procrastination. So let me just say that I love podcasting. I love doing it. I love listening to podcasts. I listen to them almost every morning as I get ready. I listen to them in the car, while I work out, and a lot of times while I cook or when I'm cleaning. I truly think that they are an incredible way to reach more people with your voice, your knowledge, your personality, your offers, and your stories. Using your voice in this way can be so freeing, healing even, if you want to get deep. I mean, I've shared some pretty personal stuff on this podcast, and it's like just getting it out there it's cathartic. But people get to hear you in a more long-form content way. If you happen to be long-winded like me and you find yourself wanting to write short essays for your Instagram posts, take it to a blog and then a podcast and then repurpose the fuck out of your content. I mentioned this a bit in the rebrand story, that episode that I did about rebranding the podcast from Crushing with Abby O to the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast, about how I was finding it really hard to keep up with all the social media accounts and content that I have and that I create for and manage between clients and my own accounts, not to mention having a part-time job, et cetera, et cetera. So there's the money-making tasks that I need to be taking care of. And with the shift in my health coaching biz, I was like, this is more like a passion project now. Like I can't keep up energetically with all of this. But I also know that I will never shut up about health and wellness and self-care. So I came up with what I do want to offer. And I will touch on that towards the end of the episode when I kind of give you a layout of how I'm looking to grow and monetize my own podcast. And I switched things up so I wasn't feeling so bogged down by social media content creation. And maybe you're feeling a bit burned out on social media content and the algorithms for whatever reason it may be. It doesn't mean I won't specifically create to share for social media. I will and do, but I've definitely felt better like lighter about content since deciding to rebrand and dive back into my podcast. I really enjoy it. And that always makes a difference. When you enjoy what you're creating, it makes a huge difference. Also, personally, I have sort of a fascination with and love being a podcast host. I'm very into how voices sound. It's the same with music. If someone has a voice that is especially pleasing to my ear, it really doesn't matter even what genre of music it is. The process of getting ready to record and actually recording is fascinating to me, energetics wise. And maybe I've just always had this thing for like wanting to be some kind of producer, or it's the creator in me. Like I get to put together this piece of art and put it out into the world forever. Maybe it's the closest thing to my childhood dream of being a rock star that I'll get. So like when people tell me they want to start a podcast, I'm all for it. Seriously, go for it. Because why not? Why not? But if you're wondering all of those things that I listed at the top of the episode, let's dive into some solid ideas of how to make a podcast work for you and monetize it to grow your business, take it to the next level, expand your reach new people. You can use a podcast to share knowledge with the public in an educational and entertaining way. It's called infotainment. You've probably heard that term before. Monetize it tip, maybe you'd like to, or you already do offer some kind of online consultation, or you have a product or a brand, and or you want to expand the awareness of your brick and mortar business. A podcast is a way for you to further connect with people who could benefit from your products or services. It leads them to your offers and helps you build and expand your brand. With the plethora of so-called experts on TikTok and Instagram, you can be a voice of reason and real expertise for people who want facts, not fiction, about hair care, skin care, body care, self-care, whatever it is that you do in your beauty biz. People want facts. If you're looking to share with other beauty professionals, you could create a podcast that highlights your wisdom and experiences. You can connect with them, encourage, educate, and inspire your colleagues. If you want to monetize it, maybe you want to, or you already offer coaching or consulting, a course, training, or certifications online or in person. Maybe you want to host a conference, or you want to offer a product line. A podcast is a place where they can get to know you more, then explore your offers, like know, trust factor. You can also offer a subscription or membership to your podcast. A model you could use, this is totally just an example, is for a small monthly fee, your listeners gain exclusive access to your podcast, Q&A sessions, and ad-free episodes, plus a percentage off your offers. That's just one example. These are your VIPers that know everything first. So that's one way you could look at it. You could also look to gain sponsorships from brands that want to advertise or be promoted along with your podcast through ads, like either you're talking about them within your episode or you record an ad and place it into your episode. It could be social media mentions. They get listed in your show notes, your website, or whatever you agree to. Any way that you do this helps support the cost and time it takes to create and put out a podcast, and it helps to grow your business. Again, you should not feel bad about wanting to monetize your podcast. You are a business owner. This is part of your business, and there are many ways to go about it. So sure, you can start a podcast as a hobby, but you could also use it just like you use your social media already. You can offer in-depth insights and value in a take-along format that your listeners can tune into anywhere and anytime. Become a leader in your industry and a source for education and community to those looking to further their knowledge and understanding and feel less alone in the industry. Maybe they'd rather head to a source like that than scroll through Facebook groups and Instagram. I see estheticians asking for podcast suggestions all the time, so get on it. You can also network by collaborating with others for podcast episodes and getting yourself on other shows, which is an incredible way to gain more exposure, like one of the best ways to gain more exposure. You never know what might come from those connections. Like, it's also a potentially great way to connect with future sponsors of your podcast. And this is a big one, especially if you're feeling burned out on content creation. You can repurpose the fuck out of your podcast content. I grab sound bites for audio clips and I take the video along with quotes and I repurpose them into content. And I end up coming up with more ideas for posts or talking points when I'm writing out my podcast ideas, when I'm writing out bullet points, and when I'm writing out the whole thing. I end up coming up with more things to talk about based on that. You could also find that your episodes become the basis of a master class or a new challenge or a new course or whatever. There's so many possibilities, and it starts with this one piece of content, your podcast episode right here. So are the ideas flowing yet? Are you just getting all kinds of downloads right now? Like you're like ready to hop on a mic right now and get started? Good. So let's talk about, how do you get started? Think of the purpose for your podcast. This was kind of a big one for me because when I was originally thinking about a podcast, it was like really a different idea than what it is now. That idea grew and morphed into what I ended up making the podcast about and how it's evolved today. It's basically the same concept. But in the beginning, I was like thinking way more about dating stories and things like that, which I really don't have many current ones. So it's not really something that I will be sharing frequently on the podcast, unless it really has to do with bringing it back to self-care, self-esteem, you being fully in your worth. That's really how I relate that. And that's how my idea went from just talking about random date stories to a podcast about self-care and health and wellness. So think of the purpose of your podcast. Is it just a hobby, or do you want to use it to expand your brand awareness and monetize it? Who are you talking to? Who's your audience? What's your unique perspective or solution? And just a side note, if you're thinking I want to start a podcast, but it doesn't have anything to do with the beauty industry, that's fine too. You can still monetize fun podcasts. There's merch, there's live events, there's subscriptions, or just dropping a little buy me a coffee link or something like that to help you keep the podcast going. Also think about how you want to structure it. Do you want to be solo? Do you want a co-host? Do you want it to just be ongoing and have episodes weekly? Or do you want it to be a mini series? Or maybe you want to think about it in terms of seasons. Maybe you feel like you would better handle doing seasons of your podcast rather than just episodes year round. That, of course, can all change, but it does help you with consistency if you kind of know where you want to start with that structure. And then start thinking of a name, and then Google it to make sure that it's not already taken, it's not repetitive. It's kind of like coming up with a business name. It can be a challenge to come up with something that's not already taken, depending on what you're feeling. So start taking some notes now, jot things down for inspiration, and throw it out to your few people, if you need to, for feedback, the people you really trust with that type of stuff. Then research your equipment, your host platform, and the tech that you want to use. So it can be super simple, or you can put a little more into it to get your best audio quality with less editing post-recording. You want to set up a space that is cozy for recording as well. I know that there's a difference between me recording in my kitchen with high acoustic ceilings and my cat eating her dry, crunchy food off to the side than where my desk, my office nook is, with walls surrounding me and a normal height ceiling. There's a lot less acoustics happening in my desk, my office nook, rather than my kitchen. You don't want your audience to be distracted or turned off by the sound quality. Does it have to be this crazy production setup? No, it can be really simple, but just tap into those really simple things that make a big difference for the listener and for you in the editing process. A little effort up front goes a long way in the end. When it comes to your podcast, you can DIY the heck out of it, or you can also delegate the heck out of it. I delegated the big pieces of my launch when I started my podcast, and it was the best decision for me. Not only did I have somebody helping me with the ideas, the music for my intro and outro, and topics for my first 5 to 10 episodes, she took care of all the bits and pieces of tech, setting up the host platform, made recommendations, and helped me bring my vision to life a lot faster than I would have on my own, overthinking every damn thing, especially when I was in a really busy business building season of my life. I had a lot of commitments with mentorships and programs I was in, and that really helped me get my podcast off the ground months sooner than I ever would have on my own, not to mention the brain power that I relinquished having somebody to delegate the bulk of this process to. And that actually inspired me to make a business move recently. I've been doing some social media management, which I've mentioned before, and recently expanded to podcast editing and tasks with my sister, who has been a podcast manager for 4 years. I've loved this foray into the virtual assistance world in general, and I've been thinking about how I can do more. So my sister and I we talk about business, we talk all the time, but we've talked about going into business together before. I mean, we have bounced business ideas and topics and discussions and things just back and forth for the last few years at least, and we have recognized where her strengths are and where my strengths are, and how that pairs up so well with each other and how we can help each other. So we've teamed up to start Wonder Podcast Productions, our podcast management agency, which is really, really exciting. It's so cool to see your podcast vision come to life and know that it will sustain with our help. It helps you stay consistent and avoid pod fade, which I also call podcast ghosting. We're all about helping you create a greater impact with your business to support your life goals, and podcast management is how we do that. It also supports our visions and goals for our life as well. That's been a big thing for me recently and why I've made so many shifts, and I'll put that in a future episode. But what a podcast manager can help you with is allow you to simply show up and record. Send the audio file over and allow someone else to do the major work of editing, show notes, scheduling, pulling audio clips and quotes, social media graphics and copy, and really so much more. If you want your website updated, if you want a newsletter, I mean, truly it relieves so much time off of your hands. All of the tasks that bog you down as a host and a business owner taking care of the day-to-day and trying to have a life, possibly, are no longer on your plate. Wonder Podcast Productions offers a podcast launch package and 3 different tiers for monthly management, as well as a podcast audit. A podcast audit is great for those of you with a podcast already that want to make sure you're getting the most out of it, or if you want some fresh eyes on it and fresh ideas. If you're interested, visit wonderpodcastproductions.com, which will also be linked in the show notes. Now, I thought it might be helpful to share what I'm doing with my podcast, with the Beauty Pro Wellness podcast. What are my goals? How do I plan to monetize it? What's the greater vision, right? So let's just lay it on the table so that you can have an idea, so you can see the roadmap, essentially. I just rebranded the podcast to make it more niche and speak to a really specific audience. That has really helped reignite my passion and creativity along with clarity. My goal for the podcast is to be a source that beauty pros can go to that speaks specifically to them when it comes to your health and wellness, from physical, mental, emotional, to even financial health. I have guests scheduled to help with cross promotion and bring more value to listeners. In terms of monetization, there are steps. So first, I'm ramping up my efforts and releasing episodes consistently to build up the podcast community and the audience. I've been on and off this past year, so really dialing in on delivering the value consistently. I'm also offering affordable sponsorships as a way to partner with the podcast and then expose you, the listener, to really awesome people and products that I believe in. Again, they won't be a sponsor if I don't share things that I'm not pumped about. And later this year, product-wise, I will have some mobility videos for beauty pros available for you to buy. So the plan is to offer videos for individual areas of the body to help you take care of your neck, back, shoulders, hips, etc. Or you can purchase them as a bundle. Maybe they'll even be a membership. I have also thought about a strength training plan as well, and actually created one before the pandemic. And then when we all got shut down and we couldn't go to gyms, that kind of got put on the back burner. And then I got way sidetracked, you guys. So I've thought about bringing that back as well. But for right now, definitely want to get those mobility videos out there. And then as for any type of coaching where there's a little bit more one-on-one, I will offer my Self-Care CEO VIP Day again soon. This is a coaching intensive to help you evaluate any gaps or set up your self-care and wellness routine so that you can actually stick to them and reach your goals. It comes with additional support via like Voxer, like text or voice messaging, so you have accountability and feedback as you take action. And I basically dropped an ad for Wonder Podcast Productions earlier in the episode. I help launch and manage podcasts, and I would love to help you with your podcast. So by telling you about the service, the business that I have and the service I offer, you can then go click on the link. You could fill out the very brief form, ask for your name and your email to get our package and pricing guide. You look through that, and whenever you're ready, you schedule a call and we'll talk about launching or managing your podcast. That's a perfect example of monetizing your podcast right there. It's just simply talking about the things that you have expertise in and then showing people a way to work with you further. So as you can see from what I've just laid out, there's a mix of offers that I'm like more involved in, and also some that are more passive and eventually evergreen. Like the mobility videos, once they're available, they are available for you to buy, purchase 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. And also, huge note here that your podcast is also evergreen content. It lives forever. It lives forever. It definitely has a longer shelf life than an Instagram post, right? You might look through like 3 or 4 of my posts and then be like, whatever. But here we get to chat for 10, 15, 30 minutes to an hour if I have a guest at a time. When I go on road trips, I listen to a mix of podcasts. I do listen to music sometimes too, of course, but I listen to a mix of podcasts. That is somebody diving deep into your content and just filling themselves up with your knowledge, your wisdom, your personality, like all the things that you have to say. It's so freaking cool. And then you just get to have that available to them forever, whether they start at episode 1 or 13 or 150, like whatever it is. I hope that this episode has given you major inspiration, major motivation to get your ass started podcasting already. Just do it. Do it like Ben Stiller in Starsky and Hutch. Do it. Just do it. You know what? You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have like newscaster, radio show host voice. You don't have to have any of that. Just show up as you. Share authentically. Share your wisdom, share your knowledge, your personality. People are going to connect to that. If you need some extra help, follow along Wonder Podcast Pro on Instagram, or go grab our package and pricing guide with no obligation at wonderpodcastproductions.com. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Coach Abby O, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for tuning into the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes, leave a review, and share with your friends in the beauty industry. Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast is produced and crafted by Wonder Podcast Productions.